Tonight, we have a very special guest with us, Alice Sebold. So, Alice, you had started to write The Lovely Bones when you stopped entirely to write Lucky instead, right?
Right. So I did take notes for Lovely Bones while I was working on Lucky. As weird as this sounds, I think that after writing the first chapter of Lovely Bones, in which Susie is raped and killed, there was some urging on Susie's part that I got my own business out of the way before writing further into her story. When I say on Susie's part, I mean the demands of her writing to tell her story, and using me to do so meant that I had to unload my story someplace else. It wasn't going to fit into the book I wanted to write for her, so I went ahead and wrote Lucky. But whereas in Lovely Bones, the rape and murder scene was the first thing I wrote, in Lucky, it was the last. The first chapter in Lucky is the last part I wrote. I definitely feel that Lucky was part of the process of writing Lovely Bones. I think it exists on its own, but I don't think I'd have written it if not for the demands of writing the novel.
It's interesting to hear that because Lucky reads as if it was compulsively told, it doesn't feel like a book that inadvertently came into being. How long had it been between the rape and the time you began to write the book?
I think 15 years by the time I started drafting Lucky.
Had you considered at various points during that time, I need to write this book?
Never. Some of the most obvious things don't present themselves. I lived in New York for my 20s and early 30s, and I wasn't really living a life that was conducted to reflection, so I was writing a lot of other things. I had my East Village novel, things like that. But self-reflection was not part of my makeup then. When I moved to California, which I guess is a National Geographic switch, I met other people who were about writing in a more serious way and a less artistic way. They all pressed me to write my story. I think because they realized that if I did that, my fiction would be cleaner and better on the other side.
What was your writing style for The Lovely Bones?
Well, I wrote a lot that isn't in the book, and it isn't even referenced in the book. That's why I write. I discover where I'm going just by writing, which means that I end up writing way more than ever ends up in the final book.
So many of the authors have a home base in New York or somewhere in the surrounding area, but you left and came west to California. Why is that?
There's a saying that everyone thinks there's a famous in LA. Well, my counter to that is that everyone thinks there's a literary genius in New York. But it wasn't New York that caused me to leave. It was me. I needed a different atmosphere. It didn't work for me. I know it works for many, but I felt that my natural self-judgment, which is intense, was turned up too high by the incredibly judgmental surrounding of New York. That could act as a big motivator if you had a different personality than mine, but I'm already so self-critical that I don't need any help. That's one of the reasons why Glenn, my husband, and I don't even live in downtown LA. We live outside the city in a place where there's only one other writer I'm aware of. It just lets you do your work and hang out with people who don't care what you do. I think that's very important.
You have a long career in front of you.
But for 15 or 20 years before I was published, I was floating in and out of the atmosphere where everyone else was getting published. So it seems as if it's taken a lot longer. Not just to me, but to other people who know me or know who I am, have studied with. It leads people to the question, if I was writing and I knew those people, why did it take me so long? I think there are probably a couple of answers to that, but again, the ultimate answer is that I've now published 2 books that I can stand behind, which to me is what it's all about. I'm fine. I have my dog, a husband, and who the hell knew that would ever happen? I've got great friends and another book under the way.
What's the next book? More fiction?
It's a big secret. No, it's more fiction, another novel.
What have you been reading? What have you been reading lately?
Absolutely nothing. I read Vogue on the plane yesterday.
Okay, then not so lately.
Okay, some books that I've liked a lot recently were The Good Thief, so I've been reading that.
Do you read a lot while you're writing, or do you like to keep those two things separate?
I have fits and starts. I actually get a physical need to read. I read the way other people overeat. I read way too fast, then it's over and I'm moaning. I shouldn't have read that whole thing, but I obviously read. Even if I'm working on my own stuff, I feel a hunger come for reading. I'll work on a project basis within my own work, get into a place where I can sit on the desk for a weekend maybe, so I can plow through a book I want to read. That's my real love. Instead of moving around the country, I'd be very happy sitting at home reading a lot of books.
Well, Alice, that's about all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing your story. And for those of you who have not read Lucky or The Lovely Bones, I suggest you go out right now and get yourself a copy. Have a wonderful evening, Mr. Johnson's class.
Thank you.
Bye.